Great presentations, everyone. First of all, thank you all for all that you have contributed and collaborated with over the semester. I've learned a lot with you all, and I'm thankful for that. So today I'm going to share with you how I conceptualize what the wicked problem of higher education is and how I envision being able to align theory with practice. So for this class, I designed my studies to be a journey, an excursive journey that included engagements aligned with Fink's taxonomy of learning, and including service learning and personal narrative research. And what I'll be talking about today is my fifth project, which is the synthesis. So what is good education in a wicked system? We looked at a lot of great frameworks, and in the interest of time, I won't go through all of my the ones that resonated with me the most, but they're on the screen. And when I was thinking about all of them, we hit upon Kassar's piece and systems theory. And one thing that she mentioned in there is that the change most likely is possible when all aspects of a system are adjusted. And going back to review my notes and thinking about all the different amazing frameworks, it made me think about, what patterns do we see in what the theorists are telling us. And one thing that really struck me was that, there's the tension is something that they talk a lot about, and the need to create opportunities for freedom and for students to develop the capacity for creativity. So going from library to tag, and then also looking at I included looking at a few other diverse voices, such as Bell Hooks and Maria Montessori and Sarah Ahmad, who wrote a really great book on belonging that really resonated with me, and in her view of being that in critical transformative experience of education, it really matters to take a look at sort of the elements of the system. So it made me think about how is balance achieved in other areas, in other disciplines. And in engineering, we have structures such as this. This may look like a baby toy, and it is, but it is also how I envision what a ideal university structure could be. This is what in construction is called a tensegrity structure. So the elements of the structure are flexible, and when compressed, the tension is distributed throughout, and that allows for its strength in the structure itself. So thinking about how that applies was something that I started with, but on an internal basis. But before jumping into how that theory can apply to action, I wanted to also take a scope of what's happening right now in higher education. And obviously we have this, huge seismic shifts with this pandemic. In Kassar's words, she called it a shift of the societal field. And that is having really immense repercussions for decision-making and organizational restructuring at universities of all sizes and all types across everywhere. And AACU just recently published a really fantastic report that I encourage you all to look at, but you may want to have a glass of wine while you do, because it's very sobering. And a lot of university presidents are talking about cuts across the board, layoffs, hunkering down, really reducing research and development. There's some really intense seismic shifts that are happening that we are going to have to contend with for years to come. So that's something to keep in mind, I thought, in looking at any framework and how you apply it. So out of the many challenges that are ahead for universities, to dive into one of them, I chose retention, because I felt that was really an important thing to keep in mind in decision making going forward. And looking at what the research tells us, the American Talent Initiative Impact Report, which is funded by Bloomberg. I think it's fascinating, and out of almost over 3,000 universities, we found only about 300 qualified for the study that had at least 70% retention rates within 6 years of study. Another interesting recent study out of Harvard found that college dropout is widespread, and a lot of studies in the past have focused on early exit, but their study is unique in that they looked at college dropouts in the last 2 years of study at a 4-year public universities in Florida and Ohio, and they found pretty widespread dropout rates that indicate that even for students that about 30% of dropouts complete at least 3/4 quarters of their credits needed. So thinking about how, going back to the theory and how we can put that into practice, I thought about what interventions could be designed to address and increase retention. And I thought it important to start with John Tagg's framework of thinking about double loop learning and how important that is in order to attain the flexibility and autonomy for learners, and to really have it be a learning not just for the students but also for faculty as lifelong learners. So governing values of diversity and equity beyond just access, flexibility and collaboration across functions, looking at where are the tensions, where are they happening, what are opportunities for working together across units in universities, and then the importance of freedom within structure in order for there to be agency for learners. And then the importance of informal learning. And I thought that this was really particularly important looking at the seismic shifts with this pandemic and whether we stay in a virtual modality, and how important it is to create spaces for informal connections. So proposed interventions, which I would call pulses, would be a pre-matriculation lab for students that focuses on introducing them to the cultures of the university, metacognitive skills, allows for peer bonding, and also life design lab, so they can really think about their own learning journey and how they wish to advance from the very start. And then I think it'd be important to have more increased collaboration for advising across units of the university, instead of having silos of advising between academic affairs, student affairs, and diversity initiatives, but really sort of coalesce that into cohort-based, diverse peer groups led by a staff or faculty or alumni. They could help provide guidance and engage students across the different areas of the school's mission. Then I thought it also was important to have double loop course qualitative pulse assessments. So a lot of course evaluations happen at the end of the course, and that doesn't really benefit students. It benefits I think overall learning in the long run, because that feedback can be used by instructors to improve their practice and craft. However, in order for the student to have for it to be a double loop, I think it's important to have a pulse point at the beginning of the course for feedback, and for the student to have a chance to share with the professor, what they wish for them to know about themselves in order to forge the bonds that are needed for there to be a meaningful learning exchange both ways, for the instructor as well as for the student. And then to create faculty incentive systems for engaged pedagogy. As is, there's a lot of tensions between what is expected of faculty, how much is expected, what's feasible for them, and how they can engage in the classroom. And so providing ways that will encourage faculty to connect with students, I think is really important, and tying that into tenure incentives. So looking at, where do you start with any of that? Just diving into one of them, I was thinking about advising. And I thought it'd be, good to start just looking at the models of the pre-pandemic, how did advising look like? You know, where those students, what are the pulse points for students before this pandemic on how they received guidance and advising, what communications they received. So I outlined that. And then thinking about where are those pulse points in a virtual modality of learning that are missing and impacted by this shift. And so highlighting those and then thinking about, you know, how to provide equilibrium in that transfer of modality. So questions that I'm left with, you know, in thinking about all this are, you know, how does transformative learning possible without leaving home? Because a lot of times when you bring, particularly for equity issues, when you bring students to campus, you're exposing them to a new environment, and when you have learning in a virtual format, that's not possible in that sense. And so how transformative is the best quality that can be feasible in those circumstances, and what supports are possible to provide. Also thinking about research insights into, you know, the equity versus quality of asynchronous versus synchronous learning connections for students who have family or work responsibilities and may have to, you know, do the bulk of their studies late at night, or and other times, you know, logging into class, it might not always be feasible. There's a lot of challenges that come up for students in this new modality of learning. And then what are the ed tech possibilities for virtual learning? What's possible beyond just Zoom? And then the legal implications. I attended a seminar this past Tuesday held by AACU on the legal implications, and it's really fascinating. I think a lot of university leaders across the country are, they said they're losing sleep over thinking about what are the implications for how a university can uphold their obligation to provide a safe space when we return in the fall. What will that look like on the ground? Will there be temperature checks? Will there be mandates for how students are allowed to interact? How do you handle residential life and so forth? So there's a lot of questions there that are yet to be determined. So thank you, everyone, and I'm glad to answer any questions.